Hello there, and welcome back to the AgostinhoZinga show with me, your host, AgostinhoZinga, and this is episode number 465. That's 465 of the AgostinhoZinga show. How you doing? How you feeling? Great, amazing, good to hear. If it's your first time checking out the show via YouTube, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment down below. If you listen via the plethora of podcast apps out there, make sure you leave me a 5-star review and share that with your friends. And of course, support via Patreon for exclusive AgostinhoZinga show content, as well as one-off little episodes. I do movie reviews and all that malarkey. Did I say that right? Movie reviews. Please head over to patreon.com/Agostino to let us $1, the equivalent is £1 per month. You get access to all the bonus content available on there for you to consume. Oh God, how are you? How are you? I'm doing well. What's happened in the past week? Nothing's really happened in the past week, but everything's kind of happened in the past week. In the past week, you've basically found out that United, as much as they want to, make it seem as if we are trying to close the gap to Man City, we're trying to compete with the other clubs in the top four and trying to win all the big trophies out there. We're not really about this life. We don't really care, right? I think we should have kind of got an inkling or an idea as to how the club basically views us, or their owners basically view us, the Glazers, by their kind of failed coup or their failed kind of, attempt to try and join the European Super League. That should have really given us all the indication as to what was really going on there, because you would imagine, right? If they really believed they only got a Solskjaer and they really thought this experiment and this way that we're going forward with the cultural reset, if this was really the great hope for us kind of retaining or going back to our level where we were previously, and maybe winning a league title sometime soon, maybe winning a couple of more domestic titles, and maybe winning and competing for the Champions League, you would have assumed that they would kind of back up the Brinks truck and give Ollie everything he wanted in terms of us getting back up there, but they haven't. Right, we've been hearing these protracted rumors about Jadon Sancho. Now it's going to enter a whole different bit of drama with him, similar to what happened last season. Most likely we'll definitely end up with Jadon Sancho. I'm not really doubting that. I think there's just too much media potential and branding and commercial money tied up in him for United not to do that deal. I think whatever they spend on Jadon Sancho, they'll get back in a couple of seasons in terms of shirt sponsors, in terms of shirt sales, in terms of just him being a little bit of a social media maven in that regard. So if they spend upwards of 90 million on him, they'll definitely see that as a good investment, especially if they can get 5 good seasons out of him, regardless of who's in charge. But in terms of actually rebuilding the squad or adding to it in order for us to compete, because imagine, some fans out there generally think we're the second best team in the country, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we've kind of finished there by proxy. Chelsea had a bit of a poor season. They basically had Frank Lampard, who was a novice manager for half of the season. He got sacked, and then basically Thomas Tuchel has basically brought them back up to where they kind of should be, maybe a little bit above us. But and then Liverpool obviously imploded due to their injury catastrophe. So second is a bit of a false position in my head. But some United fans out there truly believe that we're the second best team in the country. If that's the case, we're gonna need a few more players in order to kind of close, what was it, 18 points or whatever it was between us and Man City. So as much as we were second, we weren't really second, close to the league champions. We were second, maybe best of the bad bunch, right? Best of the rest sort of thing. But that aside, you'll just imagine that there'll be a little bit more onus, there'll be a little bit more importance put towards the signing of players and getting us back to where we should be. Because at the moment, it just feels like, for some reason, fans alike and maybe people in the club generally think if we get Jadon Sancho, that's going to be enough. And I don't necessarily think it is. We need more than that. We need a defensive midfielder. We need possibly another right back to compete or to take the position of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Right, we need those players probably more so than we probably need a Jadon Sancho. We could probably get away with having the same attacking lineup, but with the inclusion of maybe an actual high quality centre back to compete or to kind of challenge for the position that Maguire's got. Even who cares? A right back to kind of compete and take the spot maybe eventually of Aaron Wan-Bissaka in terms of being able to be a little bit more comfortable on the ball, more attacking and technical ability on the ball, wherever that may be. And then an actual deep lining centre midfielder who can play DM on his own without having somebody else next to him, so we can do away with a double pivot. That'll then free us up to play more, midfielders in midfield with maybe one deep lining playmaker there. That would take us a long way in terms of bridging the gap, as opposed to just signing Jadon Sancho. But again, this club and the way it's all set up is just bizarre. The Jadon Sancho affair, the transfer saga is going to rumble on and on. For some reason, we've hired a football director in John Murto and he's assistant in Darren Fletcher, who, have the combined European contact list of, I don't know, an amateur, right? I've never really been seeing them be mentioned in the sort of same sentences as some of the other big glitzy directors of football out there. But who knows? Maybe we don't really know what actually goes on with their job day to day. But you'd imagine if we hired a director of football, that our transfers would be a lot more smoother, right? The way we'd maybe approach players, identify players, get the deals done. There would be some sort of difference, you could tell. But so far, I've not seen any difference. I've seen loads of information getting leaked to the press. I saw recently another journalist come out and say, oh, supposedly we're not being linked. We haven't directly spoken to Borussia Dortmund regarding Jadon Sancho, which means maybe we're using an intermediary. Maybe we haven't actually spoken to him in general. We're just waiting for the perfect time. I don't know when the perfect time is because, you don't exactly want Jadon Sancho to go to the Euros, tear it up, play completely, out of his skin, amazing, be one of the best England players out there, and then for his price to increase further, or for the competition for his signature to increase, by a considerable amount. Because as much as we're getting the indication that he generally desperately wants to come back to England, and his heart is set on playing for Man United, if another big club comes in for him, which he could easily play for, a Real Madrid, if they're trying to, maybe rebuild their team, even a PSG, whoever it may be, you could definitely see him going there as well. It doesn't necessarily mean we're the only, high value destination that he's going to have access to, especially if he plays well in the Euros. So I don't know, man. Football's kind of bumming me out. Being United fans bumming me out. Watching England's going to be bumming me out during the Euros as well. It's just a whole bag of nonsense. And what happened the other day with the England against the Euros? 1-0 against Romania, but only England could play friendlies against nations like Romania and have more questions than answers heading into the Euros. It's always like this with England, and it's always a nonsense. We've got this weird England selection where, for some reason, Gareth Southgate wants to take two injured players with him to the Euros in Jordan Henderson and Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire probably being less injured than Jordan Henderson because he played more recently, but then he's been out for a while, obviously missed the Europa League final. But Jordan Henderson has basically missed 3 months of football, it feels like. And now he's heading into the Euros with no match sharpness, no match fitness. The Euros are notoriously for, any international tournament is notorious for starting very quickly and ending very quickly, right? Players don't really get a chance to play into any kind of rhythm. The tempo is usually really slow or really quick. And, again, there's no real chance to get any sort of match sharpness when you go away for international duty. You sort of just have to start going on the ground up, right? You can't really take any time away from it. So it's a very strange selection to pick him in. And then you think to yourself, okay, why are you picking him? Is it because of his dressing room camaraderie and the fact that he has this captain's material thing, whatever, right? But you think at the highest level of football, you just need the best players available who are on the best level of form, especially international tournament, considering how short it's going to be, especially if you get knocked out. You just want the best options you have available who are the best form, just to kind of hit the ground running. You look at what Spain did with Sergio Ramos, right? He kind of had a bit of an up and down season, mostly due to injuries, and he wasn't taken to the Euros just because, what's his name? Luis Enrique just didn't think it'd be beneficial for the team overall to have somebody in such poor form, and obviously with these patchy injury record, to take him to the Euros and only for him to get injured, in the first 20 minutes of the first game, because he's, of course, is an older player. But for some reason, with England, we tend to always carry passengers like this. Like, we've already put ourselves in a bit of a corner by having 4 right backs. Then suddenly the universe says, oh, you can't have 4. And Trent Alexander-Arnold ends up pulling his hamstring, whatever it may be, and then he pulls himself out. So you'd imagine that, okay, now with that space, maybe, include somebody like a Jesse Lingard, who's really unlucky not to go to the Euros. That has to be said, considering how well he played for West Ham and the fact that he's one of our informed attacking players. The fact that he has more, I think he's only 3rd in terms of goal contributions overall in the league, right? And this is halfway through the season after, I think, Harry Kane and Iheanacho, right? So he's playing amazing, out of his skin for West Ham. For him not to go to the Euros, especially considering how versatile he is, the fact that he's got international experience with England, the fact that he's a very good positive influence to the dressing room, everyone seems to like him. That's actually a player that you could legitimately just bring along as a cheerleader, who would be good vibes, who wouldn't be moping and having a sour face if he didn't get picked. But when he did if he does get included in Ajax to help the team, he's going to give his all because he loves playing for England. but then the other players haven't necessarily played. It's just, I don't know. It's just a really, really interesting and weird time to be an England fan. It really, really is. It's going to be an absolute shit show. You just know it. You just know it's going to be a shit show. Like, I think of people like, even like a James Ward-Prowse, he must be super unlucky too. He's looking at Jadon Henderson coming on for, I don't know, 45 minutes into he came in for the second half, I think, against Romania. He misses the penalty that he probably shouldn't have taken, right? What's his name? Dominic Calvert-Lewin basically wins the penalty on his own. He ends up, kind of flicking the ball into the box and then, going to it with his head, connecting with the Romanian player's foot. Keeps giving us obviously dangerous play in the box. He gets a penalty and he gets a chance to, maybe score a goal for England in front of his family in the last friendly until the Euros actually start for real. Get his confidence up, and then Captain Fantastic Jordan Henderson, like, he reminds you of every single player that I've ever played with in a team who's kind of gone on to have trials for like professional clubs, but he's crap, right? Somebody that's just got all fitness, like all kind of, he's like a less sort of impressive version of a James Milner, right? James Milner has actually got a lot of technical ability, right? He's obviously a very versatile player, can play legitimately anywhere in the park apart from up front. But Jordan Henderson is just such an engine room type player, the kind of player that you definitely saw at trial. You just couldn't understand why he keeps getting picked to go trial for these pro clubs. But then he's got, he's hella fit. He doesn't really have any vices. He just eats, sleeps, and breathes football. His dad's basically bred him to play football. Like, it's all kind of all football related. He does that whole hand behind the back thing when he's talking to the press and all that malarkey. Yeah, me and the boys did a good job. It's just a shambles. It's just a shambles. And if anything, he's one of the players that really does benefit from the Liverpool system. He needs a good system. With Liverpool, he looks sensational. You take him out of Liverpool and put him to a regular midfield, he just is going to be a bit average. It's not his fault, but it's just is what it is. So to take a player like that, who's, not in form, coming off the back of an injury, it just seems like suicide. Why would not just actually take actual people that can actually play football at the moment who are on form? James Ward-Prowse has, disgusting set-piece delivery. Could be a great option off the bench. Versatile, wherever that may be. Jesse Lingard, again, on form. And then, now he's replaced Trent Alexander-Arnold with Ben White, who isn't going to play, especially if he's considering playing Harry Maguire. Ben White would have been a good addition for England if Harry Maguire didn't go. But because Harry Maguire is going, who's definitely going to play, even though he's injured, what's the point of taking Ben White? Because he's not going to play the entirety of that flipping England thing. But then it makes me think that maybe he took Ben White because he knows most likely Jordan Henderson is going to be injured, so he's going to probably end up pushing Ben White into midfield or something. It's just unnecessary. England always do this, whether it's Wayne Rooney with his broken foot or Beckham with his metatarsal. Like every flipping tournament, there's always one or two nonsense decisions when it comes to players that are injured or not injured, but because of their names and their profiles and who they play for and their sponsors, they just get taken along for the ride just for the sake of it. Like, what's the point? Really, what is the point? But, I don't know, man. Football is frustrating. Like I said, United in England just like really getting on my tits. Really getting on my tits. I can't deny it, but it is what it is. I guess we have to just kind of roll with the punches. Apart from that, what else has been happening? Went to Paris Studios the other day. That was fun. Ended up going to one of their bigger pro rooms with the 3 decks. Ended up testing the Pioneer DJM, whatever they are, 3000s, right? The new ones with the big screens. Wow, what an experience. Fairly slick, fairly what's the thing called, slick or slippery sort of feeling towards them. You kind of have to get used to the overall feel of the jog wheel. There's something changed in the weight of the jog wheel and how it feels to touch. It's a bit odd to get used to. The touchscreen is really big, like surprisingly really, really big. Something I didn't really take any notice of when I was watching some of the reviews on YouTube. So that was something to get used to. Probably distractingly big too. I think there's probably a little bit too much going on in the screen overall. You can touch it and all that malarkey. So I think it kind of takes away from the idea of just focusing on being able to kind of put together cohesive mixes that kind of, tell a story, that are able to kind of take the crowd on the journey. There's just too much entertainment going on in that thing for my liking. If I have to be honest, for my liking, too much entertainment. But a decent little system, decent little room. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Plastic Peoples, the DJ Pro Room in Pirate Studios, it definitely did remind me of it. The prices are still astronomical considering what they started out at, and I have a feeling, especially now with the world reopening and people be able to go to actual clubs, like the amount of people that are actually going to be going to Pirate Studios day to day is definitely going to decrease, or if it hasn't decreased already, judging by the amount of promo emails I've been getting lately. It definitely feels like Pirate Studios' appeal overall has been dwindling somewhat, and it's a shame really, because like I said in the beginning, it felt really raw and kind of undergroundy type thing. Obviously it's kind of built up and popular over time, but even stuff like the newsletters and the emails you used to get from them were really informative, super funny stuff. Like the one of the only newsletters legitimately that I had actually opened, right? Most of them I kind of ignore, apart from like maybe Ryan Holiday's book recommendations, right? The guy that read The Obstacles Away, he's got a really good email list that he kind of puts through of kind of books that he's reading month by month. That's something I always kind of keep an eye on. Tim Ferriss has a really good one called 5 Bullet Fridays, I think, to putting together loads of interesting links and stuff that he's found online for products, whatever, for self optimization products, whatnot. But the pirate ones were really good. Great kind of all round information on stuff that's going on in electronic music and stuff that's going on in DJing, stuff that's going on in events and all that malarkey. Really, really good. And then over time, something changed about the tone and about the content of it. Just got a bit crap. And now, over the last few months, they've quietly and covertly hiked up the prices on all the rooms, and there was no announcement. And usually they would announce anything, right? They would announce that they changed the color of the flipping walls in their studios. And as soon as the prices went up in all the studios, no announcement, no nothing, just complete radio silence. And they just put it up quietly in the background. And it's a really bad move if you think about it, because obviously now with the world reopening, if anything, the prices being higher is going to prevent more people from going. But then obviously in their side of things, I understand it kind of, because they've been really ramping up the kind of overall launching of their studios over the world, right? Loads have been popping up all over the place. So they've obviously clearly needed to pay for them. They've got obviously CDJ 3000s that I played on the other day. So, those have to be paid for as well. I'm sure they probably hired a few more staff that has to be paid for, right? Everything has to be paid for. So at the end, it generally comes down to the customers having to kind of fork out whatever is, make that difference up. And that's the only disappointing part of it. It's like, it's so expensive. I think for the time that we were in there, it must have cost, I think, around 80 quid for around like a 6 hour set or something. And back before then, I think it was maybe half, no, we'll say half of that. It may have been 60, right? Because I think now the prices of the room per hour have gone up double. Gone up double. So if it's £10, it was £5 before, which makes a big difference if you're going to record like a longer set, if you're going to do like a live stream. It really does kind of change how you kind of interact with that space. And I was using it a lot, obviously, to do loads of live streams. You've probably seen on my channel, I had a lot of live streams before, and they kind of obviously drived up over the time because it's just too expensive to go there kind of like on a week on week basis. You're having to spend like 40 quid basically there and back, not including an Uber or whatever it may be. So just only fortunate that the one that's near me is sort of like a half an hour walk, so I can figuratively walk there, but it's still it's still a half an hour walk. It's still like a 3 mile sort of bop to get to the DJ spot thing, so which is a bit excessive. 3 miles, maybe 2.5 miles, a bit excessive if you think about it. So that's one of the only disappointing things about it. But the pro room's decent. It's a really nice vibe. It's an easy, you can imagine throwing yourself like a little party in there, to be honest. It's a really, really good sort of like space overall. But it's just a shame that, the price had to be so high and they had to kind of fuck up a really, really good thing. But, I guess you have to kind of try to account for some of the expenses that they've been making on their side. But I think that was a real kind of dropping of the ball on their part in that regards. But, I guess it is what it is. I guess they're going to end up feeling the pain of it or not, depending when the world reopens. But I have a feeling a lot of people are probably going to, maybe it's twofold. Maybe people will end up moving away from going to clubs and decide, what, I actually do enjoy just hearing this stuff loud and playing with myself and my friends, having a couple of drinks, because it's obviously far cheaper to go and book yourself like a little session at Pirate than to go to an actual nightclub, right? Obviously it's not the same, but it's just like, it's actually cheaper if you just want to experience playing the music yourself. And I'm sure there's some freaks that exist out there who just would just download an album, because I'd imagine I would sometimes do that if I didn't have a system at home or good headphones. I might just download an album or an EP I want to listen to, or a set, and just play it on that system, right? Just listen to it, right? Maybe with your eyes closed, a couple of drinks, whatever, chilling out with your friends. It could be an actual good vibe. So I can see people maybe interacting with that space in that way. But something tells me with everything reopening up and the world going back to normal, these sort of spaces are going, especially again with the price increase, they're definitely going to see some level of, they're going to definitely see a dip in some of the traction going on and around them. And again, I'd imagine a lot of the people that went there were like myself, people that are kind of, what I say, that want to be, professionals in the industry who are kind of using those sort of spaces as opposed to like general punters, like general public people, right? I don't really think your average Joe, person, your average guy on the street is running to a pirate studios. It's mostly people that want to be involved in the industry or work in the industry, in that sort of capacity. And there's not really a lot of people that do that, right? It's quite a small pool, or even if it's a big pool, there's only a certain number of them, right? It maxes out to a certain amount, so there's only so many times you can dip into that pool at the same point. So, and judging by the frequency of their promo emails and the referral scheme they got at the moment, it definitely feels like they're definitely hurting for people to come in there. But again, like I said, if you don't have a place to go and mix and you want to learn, or you just want to just fool around and use some really good equipment, because especially if you're starting out or you're playing at a level that I'm playing at in bars and pubs around East London, the equipment you're going to be playing on is going to be terrible. So if you want to actually feel what it feels like to play on actually good club ready equipment, then go there. It might not be the best thing to learn on, because I think once you go to an actual, I don't think there's a club I've been to that I played in at my level, which is kind of like, getting paid anywhere between like 50 to 150 quid a set. There's not one place I've ever been to where all the equipment was working like spotless. It's always something wrong, whether or not it's a couple of knobs missing, certain channels not working, the CDJs themselves are sticky and they don't move properly. Like, there's always something wrong. The subwoofer doesn't work, no monitors, something. It's always something. So, to try and practice on a set of 3000s at Pirate, and then try and get yourself booked in the pub, and then we'll rock up there and find out that they've got a pair of CDJ 400s or something that don't have a DJ link cable, and you have to bring two different USBs, or it's probably not the best idea. You're probably better off just like buying a controller and trying to learn off that, and just keeping the waveforms kind of blocked on your, or disabled on your screen, and learning that way. I think probably is the best way to go forward. But hey, what can you do? What else we got? Oh yeah, we got next on this. We got this. So this is courtesy of Pitchfork. This is a review for Olivia Rodrigo's new album called Sour, right? And I'm sure most people are aware of who Olivia Rodrigo is. She obviously had that standout, breakout hit over the last year or so, it feels like, Driver's License, and then she dropped an album, 11 tracks of pure and utter pop bliss, really, right? Really impressive debut album, to be completely honest, and something very surprising as well when you consider how corny and annoying that Driver's License album single was, right? I absolutely hated it. I'm just fortunate that I didn't have to. It's actually a good thing that the world wasn't open when Driver's License dropped, because that's the kind of thing that you would have heard playing in shopping malls and on radios everywhere. Just kind of that kind of middle of the road, nothing single. It just kind of plays in the background continuously. It's the sort of thing that you'd hear if you went to like a H&M changing room somewhere, right? It's just horrendous. But for some reason, she did this amazing thing where like the album sounds nothing like that single. Like all the other tracks are just like really clear, blissful, sort of like, agony induced, of course, because the whole album is basically a tribute to breakups, right? When how much they suck. And I think if you're somebody that's obviously been going through a rough time with your partner during COVID, don't listen to Sour, because it will definitely make you cry. But it's just such a nice record as an album, front to back. It really is. But it also made me wonder and question as to, why am I even listening to this, and why do I care? Is this maybe another example as to how dead and devoid we are of like good art nowadays, that I'm paying attention to Olivia Rodrigo because there's just nothing else going on, right? There's nothing else happening. So now you're paying attention to stuff that you don't necessarily care about, you don't necessarily, are interested in, and you're never in a position nowadays, because there's just so much content out there, to ever be like, what, I just don't know about this thing, I don't care, it's not for me, and I'm just gonna keep it moving. And also there's this thing as well that I've realized with this stuff too, it's impossible not to have heard one of her songs. It's just literally impossible, unless you're just somebody that just generally doesn't go on the internet and doesn't have a feed of any kind that's being populated to you by an algorithm of some sort. It's just impossible not to have ever heard her voice in some way, shape, or form. You've probably seen her face, you maybe seen her name written somewhere, but it's impossible not to have heard some bit of her music. So because of that, you're then forced to have an opinion on the stuff that she puts out, and it's just like, maybe we shouldn't be like this, in it. But it's different for me because I think I kind of pride myself on being open and, you know, available to listen to anything. Like, as long as it's good music, I'll listen to it. I don't really care. I don't have this sort of like, you know, artistic snobbery when it comes to stuff, right? As long as it's kind of good and it has some value behind it, and it comes from a, you know, a pure place, and it's trying to tell a story, blah 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 blah. And even if it's not, I'm still gonna listen to it, right? And give it a go, at least listen to it once. And the only thing I don't like is when they try and force, and when they try and pretend like what you're listening to, that's crap, is actually good. That's the only thing that annoys me. For instance, this Olivia Rodrigo album is 10 times better, and it, like, you know, infinitely better than anything I've ever heard from Taylor Swift, right? She might have some good singles out there, but in terms of her overall albums, they are so boring, right? I just find them so utterly boring, so devoid of any sort of life. Like, just, they kind of mirror what I think of her maybe as a person, right? She's a little bit dull. And this obviously has some sort of color to it. There's some vibrancy to it. There's something about what she does. Obviously, you know, who knows? Maybe this album has a ton of people helping to write it, and, you know, if the sales don't do well in the second album, most likely the third album will be a huge dip in terms of the quality of the sound of the song making, because you generally see with pop stars, whenever they're like really red hot, they always seem to have like banger singles after banger singles. But the moment they start to dip in terms of the appeal and the traction they get with fans, all of a sudden the song quality is really dip, because there's not a lot of money to, you know, the record label's unwilling to put the money behind the record. A good example is like Sam Smith. Sam Smith, when he was red hot, he couldn't not make a good single, and then the moment his single stopped resonating with the public, the quality of the single started to dip as well, because the record label were unwilling to put the money behind the record, because they knew they weren't going to be able to get it back. So who knows, maybe Olivia Rodrigo is a flipping phenom, and she's just writing all these stuff herself in her bedroom and just getting them sharpened up by pros. But it's just like, there's not a miss on the entire album. There's no miss. It doesn't. There's no skips, no miss from front to back. It's just solid. It just goes bang, 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 bang. And again, lyrics wise, if you're paying attention and you're in a bit of a vulnerable place, it'll definitely make you tear up a bit. And this is definitely an album that's deserving of a live audience, deserving of her playing it on stage, you know, and having people kind of, you know, singing and screaming these lyrics out to her back and forth and stuff. It's gonna be electric to see how this performs live, for sure. But again, I don't know, man. Should I care about this? Probably not. It shouldn't be within my remit. It shouldn't be something that comes across my listening desk. But because there's just not a lot going on in culture overall, it feels like I'm having to pay attention to things that I probably shouldn't be paying attention to, and things I probably should have an opinion on. Because am I likely to keep an eye on her next record? Probably not. But again, as an overall piece of music, this is definitely up my alley. And again, you know, it's just sonically, track listing wise, the length of it's just perfect, right? 1 to 11, I think the tracks are. It caps out to about 25, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like under 40 minutes as well. It's just like the perfect listen, legitimately one of the perfect listens. So if you're a fan of pop music, or if you're a Taylor Swift fan, I definitely think you should jump out on the Olivia Rodrigo train. If you're a Phoebe Bridgers fan, because she's gone a bit off the wild end, right? She went on Jimmy Kimmel and, you know, pretend to smash a guitar on stage, and now suddenly she thinks she's flipping, you know, some sort of punk queen. You know, she's getting a bit annoying. So if you're not on that train anymore, then definitely switch over to Olivia Rodrigo, because she definitely has something. She definitely has the it factor. She has the it factor without even trying. You know that thing that they're doing now with Dua Lipa, where they just, you know, whoever Dua Lipa's record label is, they're just hell bent on making sure that they force her pop stardom down our throats, right? They just want you to know that they want to make her the next Madonna, and it feels too forced. At least with Olivia Rodrigo, she's got something about her, right? There's something about Olivia Rodrigo. It's just like, she has the it factor. Now, should I be paying attention? Probably not, but I am, and I thought the album was good. So definitely give it a listen if you are that way inclined, because I thought it was very impressive myself. What else do we have here? Let's move to this one. Let's do more culture stuff. So this is courtesy of another magazine. This is another magazine decided to dig through their contact list and decide to get the real scoop on Halston. And if you're not familiar, Halston is a very well-known or legendary, let's say, sort of like cult favorite designer from the US who died, unfortunately, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the late 90s. One of the kind of, breakout sort of like fashion labels and names, in the late 80s, early 90s. And now there's a documentary and a movie out about, no, documentary and a TV series out about him on Netflix now at the moment. I recommend you check it out. It's really cool. It's called Halston. It stars, I think, Ewan McGregor plays Halston in it. It's a fairly decent kind of depiction of him as a person, I think, overall. Maybe not as a designer. Maybe kind of has, maybe kind of gives a good overview of his story. There's obviously some holes in it, some inaccuracies here and there. But in terms of kind of the perils and the kind of successes and the failures of what it means to be a kind of, a rock star fashion designer, it definitely tells a fairly good and a fairly good and sort of good story in terms of giving young people out there an idea as to what you should kind of look for and look out for when you're kind of ascending your way up the trajectory, right? Because it feels like the Halston story isn't really unique. It feels like it's happened to a number of people, right? This idea of like the the great ascent and then the great descent, and then kind of suddenly the people that were all around you kind of riding on your coattails and nowhere to be found in your darkest moments. So it's definitely a really cool depiction in that regard. I think the over drug use that eventually led to his overall downfall, and then the reckless abandonment when it comes to the sexual desires and that malarkey, especially during the AIDS epidemic as well, wasn't necessarily the greatest of things to see. But again, a very sobering and good reminder to people out there in terms of just keeping your eye on the prize and trying to have some sort of moderation in the things that you do. But I thought that was a fairly accurate depiction. I think overall, I think for the most part, in my brief experience working within fashion and having people that have worked in there, for the most part, especially in even entertainment, is a good example. Whenever you ever ask yourself, oh, where's such and such, or what happened to he or she, usually they always say there's always two reasons or excuses or two rationales as to what's happened to them and why you haven't heard of them recently. And it's either A, they decided to take a break and leave the industry, whether it's due to their poor sales or inability to kind of break through, or number two is always drugs and alcohol. There's never a third option. It's not because they're really trying hard and they just haven't popped through. No, even you're really trying really hard and you haven't popped through, someone's still going to be talking about you. You're still going to see that person's name mentioned somewhere. You might see them on your feed still if you follow them. But if the person has decided to kind of call it quits and not keep going because they've been knocked back too often, you're not going to see them on your feed too often. And if the person decided to indulge in drugs and alcohol, the last thing they're going to want to do is kind of put themselves in front and center on social media, because it's going to be fairly obvious that they've kind of succumbed to drugs and alcohol. So unfortunately, again, in that industry, in that scene, being that kind of wild person and indulging in those sort of things is great. It's not rewarded, but it's kind of not encouraged, not rewarded, but it's just a byproduct of the industry that you're in. Maybe it's the long hours, maybe it's the it's the kind of unrealistic workloads that get placed on people. You think of what you look at what Karl Lagerfeld was doing before he passed away, right? He was designing, what was it 7+ collections per year that he was putting together across all the brands that he was designing for. Like, just an insane level of output that he was required to do, plus on top of all that, all of the resort collections that he was doing, his namesake brand, like just insane levels of output that they're kind of putting on some of these designers coming through, especially some of the younger ones. It's just an incredible amount of work and pressure that's been put on them, especially monetarily, especially when you think of some of the big conglomerates that come after you and buy you out and absorb you into their big houses and stuff, right? And then, of course, the pressure to keep up and impress the critics and keep the fashion kids on you, and the fickle nature of the customers and the fans. One moment you're everyone's favorite designer, next moment everyone kind of hates you again. It's just a complete horrendous roller coaster. Maybe the only way to really deal with it, because maybe that's kind of why people are so shocked when people are able to kind of keep some level of sanity, is to maybe indulge in the drugs and alcohol, which might probably explain why some people were so forgiving when John Galliano had his crazy anti-Semitic outburst, because a lot of people were like, yeah, I'm not surprised you said that or did those things, because it's legitimately impossible to be a functioning normal, well balanced sort of person working in this industry. You're gonna have to snap, because it's gonna bring that out of you and draw that out of you. It might make more sense that way, but I thought it was a fairly good cautionary tale in that regard. So I definitely recommend it for people going forward. But again, some of his friends, some of his colleagues were very disappointed in the depiction of Halston, and they basically were able to kind of speak about it to another magazine. And basically this article says the following: the truth about Halston, according to the people who knew him, the new Netflix show has been derided as an inaccurate, fictionalized account. Here the legendary designer's friends, colleagues and associates set the record straight, providing an insight into the character of a man who was larger than life. So we scroll down and say here, Christopher Michael said, I met Halston through Andy Warhol. My first impression was that he was such a sweet guy, but a very different guy from the way I perceived Andy. I don't mean to say Halston wasn't inclusive, but the world of fashion was more erudite and effete by nature. To create magic and illusion, you have to be arrogant and have attitude. It's just the way it is. It's a different mindset. In the era that I knew Halston was on Upper East Side, and I was living in the West Village, so it was a very different mindset. That said, once I got to know him, I could see behind the curtain. People are much more real, and it's easier to deal with, and that's definitely something that probably still happens now. I don't think it's necessarily a thing that's disappeared. I think if anything, it is probably in fashion mostly. It's definitely more rewarded the more sort of like up your own arse you are. Obviously, it's a nice surprise when people are just decent people, but for the most part, the more kind of arrogant and really forthright you are with your opinions and your positions and how you view fashion, usually the more people want to suck you off. I think of a good example of Hedi Semaine, right? He's kind of the rudest and the most kind of obtuse and the most standoffish when it comes to kind of, critics and maybe fans alike. Really, he doesn't really engage with anybody whatsoever. He kind of lives in his own universe, and people just can't get enough of him, right? Phoebe Philo is another good example. Somebody that's kind of refused to communicate in any way, shape, or form with her fans, with critics in any way, shape, or form during this hiatus or whatever. During her time, even when she was designing at Celine. So I think those sort of like that creation of a person and personality is sort of, because I think there's a part in it in Halston where one of his first lovers or whatever kind of gets annoyed at him because he starts to change how he speaks, right? He kind of purposely puts on this kind of weird affect in his voice and kind of does this weird theatrics and how he kind of stands and poses or whatever it may be. And you can see before his eyes that his friend was slowly but surely changing. And I think that maybe was just a realization in Halston alone that in order to survive or in order to kind of reinvent himself as this newer guy, because obviously from this TV series they made it seem as if like he started off being a maker of hats. What's the word called? I forgot what the word's called, but he started to is it Millery, whatever it's called. He first became a maker of hats and then progressed into doing ready wear, right? Or whatever it may be called in terms of like runway fashion. So he kind of felt with, if he had to reinvent himself that way, he just had to turn into this other guy, this kind of personify the persona of Halston through and through. It continues here. It says, I didn't mean to preface it like Halston was untouchable. Everybody, whether it's an actor or actress, we have to create who we are, see? And especially someone like a Roy Fronrick coming from the Midwest that doesn't sell fashion, same as Ralph Litfitz or Ralph Lauren. At the same time, everyone had to reinvent themselves. In the Ryan Murphy series, they said that Halston bought the house in Montauk. He didn't buy that house. It was Warhol's house that Halston rented for a time. I have a picture of Halston lounging at Warhol's place, and he was just like one of the guys. He was just trying to enjoy himself and get him through his life. The time that I saw him when he wasn't being Halston the dress designer, he was just being Roy on the beach, but no one ever called him Roy that I know. Halston has all the person he needed to be when he needed to be. But when he was with his friends, he didn't put on airs. He maybe played into it a little bit, but he wasn't that person all the time. Same as Andy. When he was around close friends, it's hard to keep that going all the time. And that's something you definitely see from the all biographies I've read, or from the books I've read of people who were close to Andy Warhol. He had the same sort of thing. He was very different depending on who he was with in terms of groups. And obviously a lot of people kind of felt as if like the more uppity and the more kind of the more higher he got in terms of social standing, the worse of a person he eventually ended up becoming, to the point where towards the end of his life, a lot of his closest friends sort of like recoiled away from him because they felt as if like he was kind of, enjoying the smell of his own farts. But I don't know, man. I just think it must be such a there is something so intangible, something so ephemeral, something so like hard to grasp about becoming such an icon at that level. It's fairly impossible to remain humble and quite, quote unquote normal, right, as you were before. It's just difficult to do so. That's why people, maybe it's a bad example. It's why maybe some people get so, are so shocked as to why someone like N'Golo Kante, right, the box to box midfielder of Chelsea, and the recent winner of the Champions League, and why he's such a kind of like cool and humble dude that drives, I think it's like a mini to, he's a professional footballer, he earns millions, and he drives a Mini Cooper, right? A lot of people are really astounded by how humble he is and all that malarkey. And maybe it's because everyone kind of knows deep down that if they were put in the same position and they were given the same level of access and wealth and position and status and all that malarkey, they will be acting out as well. And I think, just imagine what it must be like in the arts, right? It makes me recoil and it makes me vomit in my own mouth whenever I go to like a art exhibition, right? Whenever I go to like a whatever, right? And I go and see people, I'll go to like a private view, and there's obviously people there with high social standing, and they're all trying to kind of jockey for position and try and get into the right circles to talk, and exchanging kind of empty platitudes and giggling at jokes that aren't really funny. It makes me vomit. But then imagine if you're the person that's on the end of that, and you're receiving all that love and all that adoration from people for artwork you created, in the space of a couple of hours, stuff that you just thought about when you were drunk one night or whatever it may be, right? Stuff that's kind of coming to you just without you trying, right? Stuff that you've kind of finally sort of tapped into who you are, and you kind of finally now be able to kind of relay it and put it out on a canvas, or in a piece of performance art, or in a sculpture. Just imagine what that must feel like to have people, adults, people that are way older than you, people that are richer than you, whatever it may be, better position, way more experienced than you, bowing at your feet, kissing your toes, giving you all the praise. It's definitely going to do something to your mental. It's definitely going to make you think maybe higher of yourself than probably you should be. But maybe that kind of helps with your creative output too. There needs to be maybe being a high level creative in any field it may be. It's sort of similar to kind of like the delusion that you need to have if you're like a professional fighter, if you're like a mixed martial artist, or if you're like a boxer or something. You kind of need to believe, you kind of need to have a sense of delusion that you can go into that ring, octagon, wherever you are, and beat whoever comes through those ropes or through that gate. You have to, because if not, you can't effectively fight, really, can you? Because if you're doubting your skill set, if you're doubting your position and your ability to win, then you've already lost before you even started. So you have to kind of have that level of delusion. So maybe the same thing happens with art and entertainment, right? You kind of have to believe you're the best. You kind of have to believe that all this gratitude and all this love you're getting is kind of warranted and, deserved. Like, yeah, it's about time you guys start sucking me off. I'm the shit, right? Because if not, how are you going to be able to put together 7 designs per year plus, and footwear and accessories and all that stuff? Like, how are you going to be able to do it? It's impossible. You're going to have that kind of level of delusion. Maybe. It's a picture of Hugh McGregor in the back of a limo. Let's read one more here. Peter Wise is an American artist and author of Surf and director of the Christopher Macker Studio. It says here, I was working at an orchid shop next door to Halston on 68th Street. He called me on Monday and asked if I wanted to do something for him. I said, sure. He said, I'm hosting a Charles James benefit. Okay, funny to hear that name there. At the Brooklyn Museum, so I need flowers and a reception, and then flowers for 50 tables at one dinner. It was a baptism by fire, and I passed a test. From then on, I started working with him as an independent contractor. Back then, the only place you could go to get good orchids were at the greenhouses in Long Island, California, or Florida. It was a very limited supply, and Halston liked it best. The common perception of Halston was that he was very egocentric, which was, but at the same time, he was very generous. See, everyone's saying the same thing. He definitely had a bit of an ego on him. He was a big patron of the Martha Graham. He did costumes for dance companies. He dressed for free. I met her once while delivering orchids from Halston. I went up to her apartment and she was lying on a couch in her black glamour mink coat and nothing else. I told that Halston and he said, oh, she's being very coy, wasn't she? She was being very seductive in her 90-year-old way. A day or two after Thanksgiving 1982, I was at the Olympic Towers putting to flowering orchids around, and Halston showed up out of nowhere with a couple of nephews and nieces in tow. He showed them the view of the Central Park and said, that's the children's zoo where they keep all the children he lost. The children were dismissed. Then Halston looked at what I was doing and said, that looks really good, but we can make it better. For the next hour and a half, he and I slooped and orchards around. It was very hands-on, typically Halston. He was very collaborative. He respected other people and liked to work with them. It was very intimate, and I was lucky to have that experience with him. So yeah, this is an article from another magazine. I recommend you check it out. It's called, here was the title, The Truth About Halston According to People Who Knew Him. Definitely check it out. And of course, check out the Halston series now available on Netflix. It's a very illuminating view on the legend that is Halston. What else we have here? Let's move on. What else news here we got to talk about? Oh yes, this is interesting news within the world of moving on from fashion as well, same sort of realm. So it's courtesy of BBC News. It says Etsy, weird one, right? Etsy snaps up Gen Z focused shopping app Depop for $1.6 billion. Madness, right? Obviously good to see Ship on Bell on there, but let's look at the article itself. It says here, Etsy is buying Depop, a UK-based second-hand fashion app, in a bid to target younger Gen Z shoppers. The $1.6 billion, $1.14 billion deal was announced on Wednesday and expected to go through later this year. Etsy boss Josh Silverman described Depop as a resale home for Gen Z consumers. About 90% of Depop users are under the age of 26, with young shoppers placing importance on shopping in a more sustainable way. Is it because of that, or is it just because it's trendy? I don't know if they care about sustainability too tough. Do you really think some of those under 26-year-olds on Depop are recycling and, planting trees and giving their time to NGOs and working on eco farms and stuff? I don't think so. But hey, we continue. The app, which was founded in London in 2011, lets users buy and sell used clothing through its online marketplace. Depop combines its shopping element with Instagram style direct messages, so buyers and sellers can negotiate on prices and postage. It now counts more than 30 million registered users in total of 150 countries. Etsy, however, tends to skew towards older customers with crafts and goods and vintage items on offer from sellers. It's a very interesting one, isn't it? Like, I used to work at Depop a while ago. This is a few years ago, maybe like more than 5 years ago, I think it was, right? And at the time that I was there, it went from two offices. It went from an office near Old Street somewhere, and now they've got this bang spanking amazing office near Shoreditch somewhere. That's really, really nice. Open plan, great, warmth in it, and stairs, and in the heart of kind of East London. Great little team that works there, Malarkey. And I always kind of viewed it mostly as a very, again, Gen Z centric brand. And I'd probably say even maybe younger than 26, right? The people that are generally on there really killing it. And the kids that are on there killing it are absolutely slaying, like making, money hands over fist. It's just unfair how easy some of these people find it in terms of shifting some of the products that they do on there. But it really is a bit of an odd one in terms of a buy. You'd imagine, because maybe nowadays, lately in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot more sellers on Etsy maybe selling more like kind of items that you would maybe think would be targeted towards a more of a younger audience, right? I've seen a lot of people on there selling, stuff like that brand Heaven, Marc Jacobs' new brand that he's got at the moment. I've seen a lot of people selling kind of copies or variations or imitations of the sort of like massive chunky wedge-soled boots that he does. I've seen people doing sort of like handmade version of the tabby high heel boot as well. I've seen people do variations of other sort of like younger items that they've made, maybe sold on Depop and then made specifically to order on Etsy. So there's kind of a little bit of an overlap there, but overall in terms of the UI, in terms of the overall vibe of the company, there's legitimately no overlap. Maybe there's an overlap in terms of the entrepreneurial side of things, right? People are kind of, Etsy as well, people are very hands-on in terms of how they start their business, how they operate it, what they display, the kind of copy they use, all that malarkey. And Depop has the same sort of feel, right? Even though the pages are quite formulaic, every sort of different store has a different sort of vibe around it. How they take the pictures, the models they use, the copy they use, the pricing, how they ship, it's all kind of informs the appeal of each shop. And of course, I've seen recently a couple of people that I know still work there did some like in real life sort of like pop-up event thing where they kind of, I guess it looks like they hired out space and made people come in with the actual items and put that up there. That might be something going with it forward, that might be a good angle. But I don't know, man. I don't necessarily see this on the cards at all. But maybe this is the reason why, high functioning CEOs and operators on that level are paid that big bucks, because they've definitely must have seen something in Depop that they feel like they can either tap into, learn from, or kind of absorb into Etsy. Because that's the only thing. If you're an avid Depop person, you might be a little bit concerned, because this might spell the end of the Depop that you knew and loved, because it's very rarely do, when kind of parent companies absorb companies like a Depop, very rarely do things remain the same. Things will definitely maybe change for the worse. Maybe not, maybe they will, but it's hard to imagine that a lot of the things that people love about Depop will remain the same. For sure they'll kind of change, or maybe they won't. Maybe they just might see it as a chance to kind of tap into a younger audience, and they're going to take all the kind of good things that Depop do and try to kind of copy them into what they do in Etsy. That might be a good idea. Or maybe it's just see the talent. Maybe they think the talent that works at Depop is just so incredible, and the way they've been able to scale the company, right? Year in, year out, I'm sure the numbers have gone up and all that malarkey in terms of sales and turnover, blah 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 blah, profit. Who knows? Whatever. I'm not really familiar with the numbers and all that malarkey, but I assume that could be one of the things as well. The talent pool they just want to kind of tap into. Who knows? But I definitely just see this one coming. It says here, Etsy's chief executive, Mr. Sylvan, added in a statement, Depop is a vibrant, two-sided marketplace with a passionate community and high differentiated offering of unique items that we believe the significant potential to further scale. It added that the deal would allow Depop to further expand, and although it will still be based in London and run by its existing team, that's always kind of like, that's always a... that's equivalent to like in football when the kind of owner says to the manager, yeah, we're going to give him time. That's always a kiss of death, in it, when a people say out of that. So it's like, watch your P's and Q's, in it, because things are going to change either very quickly or not at all. So let's continue. So Depop executive Maria Raga said, we're on an incredible journey building Depop into a place where the next generation comes to explore unique fashion and be a part of the community that's changing the way we shop. They come to Depop for the clothes but stay for the culture. After the deal was complete, Etsy will be home to 3 brands: Etsy, Depop, and Reverb, an online marketplace to sell and use musical instruments. Bloody hell, man. There's an online place for musical instruments. Shoot me in the head, innit? That must be one of the most boring places to work. We saw firms such as Depop and eBay and Vinted benefit. Yeah, Vinted I see everywhere on my YouTube, man. It's always kind of, hey, this is Vinted. You want to get rid of your old clutter? All that sort of bullshit. Benefit from the consumer being stuck at home during lockdown. The sales and listing items spiking, according to analytics from global data. That trend is set to continue, with the resale clothing market set to reach 64 billion in the next 5 years. God almighty. With these numbers, now you understand why they decided to tap into Depop, innit? Neil Saunders mentioned, wasn't there another app too that did resale items that folded? What was that one called? It was a UK one. Not Vinted, it was another one too. Marshallow, was it Mercari? Is it Mercury or something like that? Meraki or something like that. Anyway, one of those ones failed, so that's maybe another cautionary tale in that one, isn't it? For every Depop and Etsy and Vinted, there's always a Meraki. I forgot what it was called, something like that. Anyway, continues. Neil Saunders, managing director of global data, over the next 10 years, it will become larger still, fueled by the interest in sustainability and desire to uniqueness, and a rise in the what's that? How do you say that? Participatory consumer who wants to trade as well as buy. This whole sustainability thing, I think, is a misnomer. I don't think people are buying vintage stuff on Depop for sustainability reasons. It's mostly to differentiate yourself from everybody else. It's a desire to be unique. It's kind of maybe a response to how shit the high street is. There was a time where the high street was fairly interesting and there was kind of cool new things happening in different stores all the time. But recently I saw like an ad for the new seasons of Zara women's, and it was all like boho stuff that went out of style like 10 years ago. You don't see anyone wearing anymore. So it's like, I don't see the high street sort of lost to a lot of these fast fashion brand things online, like the Fashion Novas and all that malarkey. So kids nowadays are trying to go as far back as possible to get stuff that's gonna differentiate them from their crowd and from their peers, especially if you're that age. The need to differentiate yourself and be unique is very strong, and why the best place to do it is definitely a place like Depop, especially when it comes to value for money. You can find stuff on there, pricing, of course, shipping wise is going to be a bit of a flip of a coin, but in terms of pricing, you can get entire outfits on there, far better value and with more sort of like life in them for £100 than you could ever get on the high street, for sure. He pointed out that the market is, however, becoming more crowded and apps forced to fight for consumers' attention. Depop has also faced questions in the past over security of his app, as well as the stolen goods, as well as one crop top made out of children railway seat cover. Oh, gotta love it. But yeah, let's see, man. I don't know. Let's see. It's good for them. Happy for everybody that is still there. Some of my colleagues that are probably still working there. I never really got, I kind of left obviously because I wanted to seek other pastures new, but I was never really, enamored with the idea of having a cool job. I think some people, for some people, it's amazing being able to work in a place like that and have your kind of, be able to be part of making history and making a change and all that malarkey. But I just always saw it as a job. It never really was something that kind of bothered me where I worked. But in terms of the culture, it definitely was one of the better places I worked in. Definitely a cool group of people trying to, do good things, especially the customer support team that I was in. Obviously, people cared about, doing a good job, cared about providing good service. That was always kind of at the forefront of things. The leadership was fairly decent when it comes to like a startup, a couple of cunts here and there, but overall, everyone was fairly sound. So yeah, it's beneficial for all those guys. Hopefully, everyone kind of had a piece of the pie and was. Don't know if people got shares. Hopefully, they did. If they didn't, then hopefully they can get them now, because I guess Etsy is publicly traded, so there's an option to kind of tap in that way. And who knows, man, this might be the beginning of crazy new things. It would be great to see if they kind of decide to do some fulfillment center stuff. That would be awesome if they happen to kind of have an idea where they can kind of maybe decide to take the inventory of some of the top 100 sellers, I don't know, whatever region, and have a fulfillment center so they can just process those orders really quickly and get the items out. Because that's one thing that kind of slows down the traction of a Depop, is the idea that you're essentially dealing with independent people who have their own time schedules, their own lives, and things go out when they go out. And that was always the thing that always broke my heart working in the customer service team. Whenever you see a girl kind of contact the, for help and be like, oh, I really wanted this dress for a graduation or for a party on the weekend, and I ordered it with enough time ahead, 2 weeks, and it still hasn't arrived, and you're like, oh, yeah, I mean, and you see the dress, and it clearly is a kind of dress that can only be worn for like a party. It's not something that's going to be very versatile day to day, and then it's not arriving, and that's always kind of broke my heart that way. And it usually happened with bigger sellers because the volume was just too much to kind of keep an eye on, and life gets in the way, and you take your eye off the ball. So take your eye off the ball, right? Is that right? The eye off the ball. So it'd be quite beneficial if they decide to kind of decided to take some of that inventory on and just did like a fulfillment center thing for some of the higher sellers. And that also could be a good way to kind of generate some income, because you could charge them a certain fee, or you could take a cut out some of the profits, whatever it may be. That'd be a great way to kind of be able to push that thing forward and really take people to the next level, because that could definitely give confidence to some of the customers who decide to use the app itself. But yeah, 1.6 billion is nothing to joke about. Who knows if this will become a success or not? I didn't really see it on the cards, really, Etsy buying Depop, but hey, here we are, companies absorbing companies. It's an age-old story. Next on the list here, we have this pretty decent article here, courtesy of Resident Advisor. The return of events, New York City. New York is an odd one para me, because when I last went, there wasn't much of a clubbing scene that I was familiar with. Let me say back then, of course it existed, but I wasn't familiar with it. The only place I kind of went to that was great was it Sancho's Party House or whatever it's called? That one. It was like 3 floors, different music on each floor, like a complete vibe. Like that was really a great New York experience. I think it was a time where you only had to pay like $1 to get in, or $5. I don't know how much it was, but it was really great experience. I loved that time. But since then, obviously with me gaining more, experience and knowledge about the clubbing scene overall, I've kind of understood a lot more of the kind of history that New York played in terms of dance music and underground music and all that malarkey and electronic music. So now with all this advance of all these other new clubs coming up, kind of putting out their own path, it really makes me want to go out there and party for sure. It looks like a hell of a fun time. And this article here kind of depicting some of the first few opening nights, obviously off the back of COVID, definitely got me kind of feeling a little bit of FOMO. So it says here, from mass-free clubs at full capacity to dance in your chair affairs, Kiana Mickles reports on New York City's opening weekend. So I think we can pop right here to the bottom. This is the one here, right? Yeah, this one here. Let's go from here. Let's go from there. Let's start from here. Nick Boyd, who has been hosting Bossa Radio since its inception in April, says that the response to the events has been heartening. He says, whenever people ask me how it's going, I have to say, I can't believe so many of my same people who I really love are showing up every week. That's community. The intimate venue, mainly composed of a small checkered dance floor, has been reformatted in a notable way since the pandemic. Yeah, Bossa Nova is one of the places I definitely want to go to that I've seen always been featured in places. You definitely see that kind of black and white floor, dance floor, sort of featured in loads of pictures, the DJ booth with the little plexiglass on top. So it's definitely somewhere I want to go check out. It continues to say the cushion booths that once offered a place of respite from dance floor activity were partitioned with plexiglass seating laughing masked friends. Awash in blue lighting, Gen Zs and millennials dressed in casual clothes, alone at the bar on their phones, waiting for drinks or talking shop to the bartender. Feet tapped and heads nod as an invigorating blend of East Coast club music, garage, R&B, and trap filled the room. Many who I spoke to were vaccinated and seemed to be comfortable with the safety of attending this event. It continues, says here, I was working the entire time during the pandemic and in the public places, so I was constantly around other people, says Ellie Bottoman, 24. She continued, said, I think that more of a concern for me than coming here. A lot more people have come here all the time, so I know who I'm around to a certain degree. We continue here. There's a couple more people standing at the rave. It says at the time of writing, 47% of New York's population are fully vaccinated. It's a pretty big uptick, isn't it? Or uptake in terms of vaccinations, especially when you consider the amount of, false information out there or disinformation, the amount of conspiracy theorists, people that exist, and just generally the kind of sentiment around the vaccine in the States has been a little bit different to how it's been received here in Europe. So to see 47% of people in New York take up the vaccine is pretty impressive, to be all in things considered, especially consider how badly affected they were when it first sort of, decided to wash up on their shores. It continues, said on Tuesday, June 1st, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced that for the first time in 8 months, there were 0 fatalities and the city has resolved the COVID-19. The 7-day positivity rate has also dropped below 1%. Despite the optimistic numbers, some like Han Yang, 31, still seemed cautious about returning to nightlife. They said the following: we finally got our vaccine, so I'm pretty excited to go back. Though she expressed concern about contracting COVID-19 at the event. Said when you're in this scene, you know these people, you meet them, you see them all the time, and you become friends with them. It's a tight-knit community and I still want to be part of that. And that hesitation, that kind of concern is something that I've kind of felt from the outside, again, without being around people. I've just kind of felt, I just don't know why, but it's one of the reasons why I'm very skeptical as to how big the return to clubbing will actually be, especially when it kind of, the initial excitement of the first few months kind of peters out a bit. I think we're definitely going to see a different clubbing scene than it was prior. Obviously, that makes complete sense. It's a bit of a misnomer, but I think the initial response to tickets and the selling out of events, all that malarkey, I think it's giving people a false impression as to how it's going to actually be day to day. And I think a lot of people who have promoted events prior to COVID would know that, promoting a club event, even organizing a birthday party for yourself with your friends in a bar, there could be 100 people who confirm they're going to come, but on the day maybe only half of them will come, maybe less than half. So the idea that just because things are selling out, it's going to mean it's going to be wall-to-wall people, swapping spit and all that malarkey is just really optimistic, especially when you consider the amount of damage that this virus and this lockdown has done for people's mental psyche, and just the amount of displacement it's done to people. Have moved all over the country, all over the city. People's priorities have maybe changed. I think people are going to be in for a rude awakening as to what the scene actually is like, and maybe it's be a good thing. I still think it's going to be a good thing. I think the people that are actually going to be on the dance floor still are going to be the actual people that are about that life and really, care about nightlife and care about the scene and want to be out there and dancing with people and all that malarkey. But the ones that are not ever going to come back. I think that casual consumer, the ones that I kind of dreaded bumping into on dance floors because they just generally just came to get wasted, they're not going to come back. And I think that might be a detriment to some places, because for as much as it's good to have heads and seeing people there, maybe the large part of money, turnover, revenue, income from these places comes from just the general punters who just want to get wasted. Who knows? Because maybe they spend more money. I don't know really, how the numbers work in terms of owning the club. But I think this idea that it's just going to return to pre-pandemic times. Maybe in some cities, maybe Berlin might be an exception. Maybe places in Scandinavia might be the exception, and other places, maybe places like um, what's that place called that everyone's going to, Georgia, in Tbilisi and stuff. That might be an exception, but I think we're gonna see a lot of this sort of like hesitation and hesitancy going back, because maybe people's just habits have changed. People are just, you know what, I want to do other things. I want to enjoy myself in other ways. This is not the way I want to do my night, my kind of weekends anymore. Spending all this time at home to suddenly go back to getting on it every weekend and having hangovers that last, a couple of days. It's just not as fun of a prospect as it was prior. There's going to have to be a little bit of temperance, a little bit of a kind of easing back into the flow of things kind of vibe as well. So let's see. It continues here. Starting June 1st, Bossa will ask for proof of vaccination. It's another one. That's wild. Proof of vaccination of a negative PCR test via the Excelsior pass. If I'm not mistaken, Excelsior is sort of like an 18th century word as well, right? It's very ominous. If you're not a conspiracy theorist, that'll definitely make you think of conspiracies, right? Excelsior. That's something that's like, isn't that like if I'm not mistaken, that's like a way to kind of delineate between like the higher ups and the lower class, right? So it's kind of like it's a separation word, right? I'm pretty sure it's an othering of people. So imagine the battle between the have and the have-nots. So in order to rave in New York, you're gonna need to have a vaccine passport, one way or the other, showing either you're negative or if you got the vaccine. Like wild times, isn't it? Created by New York State, right? The state of New York. The government issued service is the first and only of its kind in the country, a combatant to the rise of the fake vaccine card operators in the US. Madness. With this requirement, the club will be allowed to operate at full capacity with maskless dancing, as the curfews for the indoor bars in New York have also been lifted as of Monday, May 31st. This means that Bossa can reclaim its former role as New York's favorite late night spot. Guests can stay until the club's former closing time of 4 a.m., which is a vibe in it, because New York as well doesn't sleep. So imagine 4 a.m. vibe. But just imagine the conundrum you're in if you're a clubber, right? You're anticipating the return of events. You're anticipating the return of clubs. They return, but then they require you to have a vaccine passport. And then they tell you the only way you're going to be able to dance and rave is to have a vaccine passport. So the clubs are going to be pushing for you to get one, in order to kind of keep, what's that RA statement? Save our scene, right? In order to save our scene, you're gonna have to get a vaccine. So even if you're anti-vax, you're gonna be put in a corner where you're gonna be like, if you wanna protect your community, quote unquote, and protect your fellow ravers, you're gonna have to get one or or have a negative PCR test. It's just a complete shit show, and it really is. It really, really is, man. Like, I don't know what a position to put people in. You're obviously putting the clubs in the position where they're gonna have to push punters to get vaccines, which is already heading into a political place, especially in the States. It's a whole it's a very tense and political thing. People are kind of keeping their vaccination status very private, maybe sometimes very public. Maybe they're very forthright in their opposition towards getting it, especially for people that are like, because you'd imagine there'll be some people that'll be like, hey, most of the people that attend this club are under the age of 30, 45. Why should we need to get one? It's going to be that kind of debate. It's just, it's a mad conundrum. It says here, it continues. For club owners interested in safety operating a greater capacity and permitting dancing at their events, the Excelsior Pass is a fast, it takes about 3 minutes to set up, and reliable option. Across New York, clubs have been at the first to experiment with the vaccine passport, inciting mixed response on party goers. Yeah, man, I can imagine some mixed response. There's some party goers here sitting in what looks like Bossa Nova Civic Club. Yeah, that's a kind of DJ booth, if I remember. Okay, it's not plexi, it's like a mesh thing. Net thing. Let's continue here. Tuck in underneath a scaffold. The entrance of Roomy sits unassumingly on West 28th Street at 10 p.m. A flash assortment of guests waited in the bustling line outside, some sporting extravagant wigs, others with glittery eyelids, many barely wearing anything at all. Once they arrived at the door, a bouncer instructed all the guests to flash the Excelsior Pass. Apart from the Excelsior Pass, am I the only person that misses all of this? Misses seeing a bustling line outside of extravagant wigs, glittering eyelids, people wearing nothing at all. That's what I miss anyway. Just the viewing, overhearing random conversations, people pretending or trying to act as if they're not high or not drunk, security telling people to stand in line and not kind of make any noise or whatever it may be, that random Ubers pulling up, like, people getting out and trying to feel important, seeing if their friends at the front. It continues. In the night hours, in the night's early hours, party founder Lady Fag spoke to me from behind a spiked BDSM leather mask, explaining the backlash she received after announcing that they would only allow entry to people who could show vaccination proof for the app. She says, "I got called a stupid bitch. I got called a whole bunch of nasty messages." She said, as her stylist gingerly tended to her hair and makeup, "You can't open a full capacity with a PCR test. Guests have to be at least 2 weeks out of their last vaccine shot. So I don't care why anyone is writing for me a PCR test. It just doesn't make any sense." This way, she continued about the requirement, "I feel safer taking my mask off, and Eli does too. The event Lady Fag runs is called Battle Him, a circuit gig party that took place monthly at the same venue prior to the pandemic. I'm told tickets to return to Rumi sold out in a matter of minutes, as many were anxious to attend the first Battle Him since the state of the pandemic." What a conundrum you put yourself in, isn't it? So the actual people at the forefront of kind of maintaining or keeping together the scene, right, providing a safe space for people who ascribe to a certain lifestyle, are now the same ones that are being harangued and harassed and abused by people from their own community because of a stipulation being put in place by New York State. Absolute shit show, innit? The continuity of self-styled regular Ray Scott, 36, arrived with two friends who had never been to the event and said, "I feel like there's a renaissance upon us. It feels very 1920s. Everybody's happy, everybody's saying hello, everybody's wanting to meet and greet and touch and dance." And you're hoping that actually happens, right, Ray Scott? You're hoping that that's actually what's going to prevail. That's what's going to lead people to having it's going to be like a second renaissance, as he said, right, in dance music. You're hoping that's going to be the case with people, and I'm hoping that's going to happen too. And that's why I've probably committed to the first couple that I do end up going to just go into them completely sober, just sort of kind of absorb and take in the atmosphere and the environment I'm in, just so I can kind of really remember it viscerally, and just to kind of ease myself back into it. Because, you know, being without the ability to kind of shuffle from right to left and stand next to a speaker and listen to really loud music is something that you definitely just can't jump into full tilt. It's sort of akin to, like, deciding to run a marathon tomorrow with no training. You could probably do it, but you're going to do yourself more harm than good at the end. And the same thing goes with raving. I think it's going to need a real slow and steady welcome back to those sort of stuff going forward. But what can we do? But yeah, the article's fairly long. I'm not going to read the entire thing, so definitely check it out yourself there. It's titled, get back on screen here, it's titled The Return of Events, New York City, courtesy of RA. Check it out. Fairly informative article. Definitely will give you a lot of FOMO if you've been missing going to the events. What else do we have here? Let's move on from that one. What else I wanted to talk about here? Yeah, let's see this actually. Peggy Gou supposedly got a new track out, and I want to hear what it actually sounds like. I've not actually heard it. It might be an actual bop. This is courtesy of RA. It says Peggy Gou releases new single called Nabby. Out now on Gudu. It's her first time collaborating with a vocalist. It's funny too that RA, the only bit of news that they reported on her since that whole Daniel Wang thing has been this. They completely removed or ignored that Daniel Wang stuff. They completely ignored all the Playgrave stuff. They could just completely ignore that, of course, because she's fucking bossed up, innit? She's with a massive label that's, it's got some of the biggest artists in the scene on their roster, or was it booking agent, whatever it may be. I remember I found it on the site on here actually. I can't bother to get up again, but she's fairly well backed, let's say that. So it made, it was no surprise that when the whole Playgrave stuff was going on, RA didn't want to report on her at all because there were too many conflicting interests there going on. And then when the whole Daniel Wang thing happened, they completely ignored that too, which was probably a wise thing considering how it kind of ended in the fact that people kind of sided with Peggy Gou more, even though Daniel Wang was kind of right in what he said, but his approach was just so horrible, especially for somebody that has such experience in the scene and whatever it may be called. It just came across super jealous and weird. It's just an odd way to kind of approach a situation like that. And the first bit of news we've seen I've seen anyway of her on RA is this new single that's just dropped, right? And I haven't really heard it myself anyway, but let's see. Out now on Gudu says here. Peggy Gou's new single, Nabi, is out now, released via Gou's own label, Gudu Records. Nabi is her first release since 2019, Starry Night. Mate, that is a hit, innit? She put out Starry Night in 2019. I don't know what people think, and if they're ever not, they think Starry Night was actually not made by her. It was made by her, but that track is an undeniable hit, right? It's a proper sing-along record. Plays well in most sets, especially if you're playing that sort of like indie dance, new disco, deep housey sort of set, right? It's gonna absolutely tear up the place, especially nowadays with people playing outdoor, sort of like beer garden, open air events. I guess, like, you know, it's gonna tear it down. No matter what you think about the lady, the track is an absolute banger, and that's 2019, you know. And she's coming back out with this track with Nabi, which I'm assuming is her attempt to, you know, try to, you know, relight that flame. It says here it features vocals from how you pronounce that? Oyuk, a fellow South Korean artist who fronts indie rock band, however that name is there. It's Gou's first time working with a vocalist. It says Nabi is out digitally and it's a 7-inch record which features a second track called Message from PG on the B-side. It's the first of 2 singles Gou has out this summer. So yeah, let's see what this sounds like, right? Let's see what this sounds like. I've not actually heard this. Let's see if it's a banger or not. I think we got a hit. Only 14 seconds in. I think we got a hit. Nice. I forgot what that sample is, but it's definitely like an old school house sample in it. It's like a, what is this BPM wise? 110, 118 ish, it feels like. Yeah, you know what? It's all right. It's not. It probably doesn't hit bang as much as a Starry Night did when that first dropped, but I think it'll do a job in an open air, 1 or 2 places here and there. I assume that the remixes are going to be fairly big, right? With her connections and notoriety and popularity, people are going to be falling over themselves to try and remix this. Especially, it'd be funny too, the people that were, you know, first to try and jump on the hate bandwagon are going to be quick to try and get involved in the remix, because if you're able to hit this out of the park, this could be one of those tracks that sort of like propel someone's career. Do you know what I mean? So definitely see this going places in that regard. So definitely watch out for remixes, again, depending on who plays in the set and whatever. But don't know, it didn't really hit the same way as Starry Night did when that dropped. But again, you know, the setting where I'm at probably kind of played into it. But first impressions, it's all right. It's blessed, it's safe, but again, it's ironic because I think this, similar to, like, you know, Olivia Rodrigo's driving license, this is just gonna be forced down your. We are going to like this no matter what, right? They're gonna make this. You're gonna make this a thing where, no, you're gonna like this track. There's no other ifs, buts, or maybe, because there's just too much of a machine behind Peggy Gou for it to just allow it to be just some random track that no one gives a crap about. But maybe this other track too, wasn't it? There's another one supposedly called Message from PG. It's the second track on the EP. That might be a sly little banger as well. We're interested to hear that one. I'm assuming that's going to have her vocals on it herself. But yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit underwhelming. Not going to lie. A little bit underwhelming. But, you know, these days in music, innit? These days in music, you don't really know what you're gonna get until you get it. It's an interesting approach too, because usually whenever I've dance music, especially big singles, they tend not to just drop them like this. Usually an artist, it feels like, especially when you look at some of the kind of music camp, the Innovision crew, those kind of guys, they usually tend to just completely, they usually try to play the single without telling you it's a single for like a year solid, maybe 18 months while they're on tour and, playing all over the place, and people are like, "Oh, what's a tune ID? What's a tune ID?" And then they'll kind of expertly kind of ignore your kind of question, and then bang, they'll announce it, right? And then by that time they built up like 18 months worth of like hype, and people all downloading snippets and cleaning stuff up on GarageBand and playing that, that kind of stuff. So when it finally drops, you're like, finally, I've got like a CDQ version, quote unquote, of the track. So it's interesting that she just dropped a single, like just fuck it, because I'm not too sure if that's how Starry Night came out. I'm not too sure if I think I might have heard Starry Night first played by like a Gerd Jansen in a set, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And then I found, and I think the interesting part of that is, I think sometimes with, maybe because of her notoriety and the scandals and just her as a person, maybe it's quite beneficial not to kind of put your name on a single straight away, and maybe just seed it to people and let them mix it in sets, and then hope it kind of just gets a fair sort of let it get like a fair critique without people realizing that it's you, because I'm sure some people are gonna be like, what, I don't care how good this is, this could be like, this could be fucking Purple Beret Mark II. I'm not gonna flip and play it. I mean, people just are not gonna play it because it's just her, which is a shame. But I guess that's part of artistry, and that people are going to somehow take other parts of your personality and maybe use that as a stick to beat some of your artistry with. It's just part and parcel of the game, innit? But yeah, again, I'm not that impressed. Maybe wait to hear it out in public, maybe not. But that is it. That's Peggy Gou's new single called Nabby. Check that out when that comes out. When's that coming to come out? It says here the date. Nabby's out now, available to buy in Bandcamp, of course, and I think the other track is going to come out fairly soon. Let's move on. We've done that. We've done this. Yeah, let's move on to this one. This is a flipping mad article, isn't it? Where is this one? Is that one? That's the one, right? Is it that one? Overture, that one, NASA. Yeah, this is the one. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, where the hell the article? That one, this is the one, yeah. This is a fairly wild article. This is courtesy of Forbes magazine, right? This is absolutely nutty stuff. So, courtesy of Forbes, it says the following: Apple employees wrote a letter to CEO Tim Cook saying that they do not want to return to the office. Right? Oh, the entitlement is just absolutely startling, isn't it? It says here, following Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, told his global workforce of 137 137,000 employees that they had to return to the office beginning the early September, right? Which seems pretty reasonable to me. He expected that employees will spend at least 3 days a week at the office and the other 2 to work remotely or from home. Not everyone was happy about this decision. In an open letter to Tim Cook, about 80 employees, 80 of the 137 employees somehow managed to get Apple to stop in their tracks. Like, that is just wild. According to The Verge, voiced their displeasure in being told to return to work, stating, we feel like the current policy is not sufficient in addressing many of our needs. The letter pointed out that the workers delivered the same quality and products or services that Apple is known for, all the while working almost completely remotely. Now, of course, that... I think I have some sympathy towards this. I'm a big proponent of what's his name, Gerber's book, Bullshit Jobs. I've obviously have had some very strong views and opinions when it comes to working from home, and the kind of reluctance of companies to allow employees to work from home, and sometimes the reasons are a bit loose and not really kind of thought out that well in that regard. And of course, with COVID, we've had to spend a prolonged period of time working from home. And I think a lot of people, myself included, have maybe changed their tune in terms of working from home and the need to maybe have that kind of balance of separating your home life from your work life. I think that sometimes the working from home thing can kind of lead to people becoming a little bit maybe encumbered to their work, maybe having no real delineation between home and work, sometimes all the concentration levels, whatever it may be called, there is definitely a place for people having a split in terms of where they sort of work day to day. But it's also, I see the importance of the ability to have people all in one building, kind of, pulling in the same direction, aiming towards the same goal. I definitely see that appeal now. I think prior, if you would have told me in 2019 that, I would live in a world where people were just not allowed to work from home at all, I'll be kicking and screaming about it. But nowadays, I kind of get it. It's quite nice to have a bit of a change of scenario, a change of scenery. It's quite nice to maybe go into the office and see your colleagues. It's quite nice to have like team meetings, seeing people face to face and having to talk to them over Zoom. It just makes for a far better cohesive co-working or whatever environment it may be called. And for some reason, I would imagine working at Apple will be one of the best places to be working in the office, right? Then their kind of new locations that they have, is it in Cupertino, wherever it may be, it looks amazing. It looks like a flipping spaceship, right? And supposedly I've read that the lunches are free, right? Fully catered in there, which obviously is a great thing because it allows you to save some money on some of your lunches and healthy options, all that malarkey. They've got great open wide spaces, the ability to work from legitimately anywhere across the campus. Like, it's a really, really great space. So do you imagine if there's ever a place where you'd want to work, to an office, that would be it. It's like it's not a WeWork studio, right? It's an absolutely Apple's optimized place of work that kind of is there to bring out the best in their employees, allow them to kind of bring their best foot forward and produce the best level of work that they can. But for some reason 80 employees fought better than some of the head honchos over there. It's just wild, and they managed to stop them in their tracks, which is crazy. It says here the future of work will see battles between companies and the employees. CEOs may contend that it is easier to manage people if they are all herded in one or several central locations. Employees have different agendas. They want to have work-life balance. A 2-hour road trip commute becomes debilitating over time. After spending quality time with loved ones, being responsible for where and when they work, it's hard to comprehend losing this autonomy, which is true, kind of, but coming into work a couple of days per week is not that difficult. I think most people that do like freelancing, sort of like contracting kind of work or jobs, have to do that anyway during the week, whether it's kind of client meetings, catch-ups and briefs. It's quite beneficial to do that stuff sort of face to face. And like, maybe 2 days a week is not enough, but there's definitely needs to be some level of a split. But deciding to work completely from home forever will work for some companies, but maybe won't work for others. And I think it should be for the company's discretion, but it also shouldn't be a given. It shouldn't just be something you just expect to walk into every single company and have that option. I think what should be a win, I think, in my opinion, the win really should be that most companies are offering the ability to work from home. Because I worked in many companies where, the ability to work from home was like a privilege, was like something you had to book in advance, something you had to kind of work up to and have like a good week, a good quarter of like good performance levels before you even kind of broach the topic. But nowadays they're providing it to everybody. And as long as you kind of prove that you're autonomous and you can work, to a good level and standard when you're at home as you are in the office, then never's going to leave you alone. And that's really the win. This idea that every company is going to be willing and able to allow people to work from home is just really, really far-fetched and really delusional. And also, it's a bit too entitled. Like, if you really want to work like that, go set up your own company. I don't know. That's what I think. It says here there was a concern for losing talent due to the requirement of going back to the office. It says Apple's remote/location flexible works policy and the communication around it have already forced some of our colleagues to quit. Imagine quitting an Apple job because they're not letting you work from home. People are insane. It says it forces people to choose between either a combination of our families and our well-being and being empowered to do our best work of being part of the Apple. Mate, they're making it. This goes back to that article that the head CEO of Shopify said, where he said, we're not a family, we're a sports team. Right, this idea that you're a family and we have to do right by you is just nonsense. We do right by our best employees. Maybe show that you're worth kind of investing and giving the ability to work from home remotely full time, and we'll do it for you, innit? Like, the employees who don't want to return to work to return to an office setting are part of a larger dissenting movement. According to a recent survey by Morning Consult on behalf of Bloomberg News, nearly 40% of respondents said that they'd consider quitting their jobs if they weren't offered flexible. Yeah, but see, that's a bad stat. This is a bad example. It said nearly 40% of respondents said that they would consider quitting their jobs if they weren't offered remote flexibility, which means flexibility. I don't think anyone's saying they expect to work permanently from home, which is what the Apple employees are basically saying. That's a completely different thing. Have the ability to work remotely flexibly is definitely important. If you've got like a young family and stuff, it'll be nice to have a couple of days a week that you can be able to take your kid to work, and we take a kid to school in the morning, or I'll pick them up, whatever they may be. That would be beneficial. But expecting every office to allow you to work from home permanently forever is just wild. So there, over the last year, we often felt not just unheard, but at times actively ignored. Messages like, "We know many of you are eager to reconnect in person with your colleagues back in the office," with no messaging acknowledging that there are directly contradicting feelings amongst us, feels dismissive and invalidating, the letter said. Yo, these Apple employees are mad, innit? They managed to get, who's that guy? They managed to get the author of Chaos Monkeys, right? He had some guy that read a book called Chaos Monkeys that I read a while back ago. He was supposed to be offered some sort of advertising role at Apple. Somehow the employees heard about this and managed to get his job rescinded, right? So he basically got hired and then sacked before he started, which is then eventually going to lead to Apple having to pay him a settlement, I'm sure, for sort of like what's that word called, unfair dismissal. I'm sure he's gonna get a fat paycheck from it. So the Apple employees have cost them already, as a company, $10 million plus. I'm assuming you probably get from that settlement. Then on top of this, all this bad PR about not working from home and remotely, it's just like, what? And I think I'd imagine, what's like the starting salary of people that work at that main head office in San Francisco, where they are in LA. San Francisco, I think San Francisco, wherever it is, that new Apple location. What's the starting salary? Maybe $150K, maybe $100,000, and you can't come into work a couple of days a week. Like, people are, mate, I don't know, man. Some people, when they have it good, they just don't know, innit? It says here, there have been a few high-profile instances of CEOs being a little too heavy-handed in their approach. WeWork CEO Sandeep Matari attempted to rally return to office campaign again as a cringy tone deaf. Matari intimated that the best, brightest, and most motivated people will go back to office. Losers, however, will stay home. Okay, that's a bit much. Those who are uberly engaged with the company want to go to the office 2/3 of the time. He said those who are least engaged are very comfortable working from home. That doesn't make any sense. That's not about engagement. He said at the Wall Street Journal's Future of Everything Festival, Matt Harani. So this new CEO is just as loopy as the founder, isn't it? Right? It's good to see people are happier when they work. Bigger issue is to do your work 5 days a week or to do your work for 3 days a week. There's a bigger issue. There's no issue of not coming to a common place. Yeah, I think he's talking a bit crap there. Kathy Merrill, CEO of Washington DC-based magazine The Washingtonia, wrote a tone-deaf op-ed piece of Washington Post saying while some employees might like to continue to work from home and in popping only when necessary, that presents executives with a tempting economic option that the employees might not like. She honestly said that if the employee is rarely around the office, then there is a strong incentive to change the status of the contractor. Merrill seemingly threatened that if her staff didn't return to the office, that she'd run the risk of being demoted and losing their full-time permanent employment status. That is wild. Some of the employment laws in the US, though, how they can even allow that to be a conversation is crazy, right? Just because you decide to work from home a couple of days a week, you might get demoted. Like, what? Instead of receiving a net salary, contractors are paid only for the work that they do, either hourly or by appropriate output metrics, wrote Merrill, indicating a not so subtle threat to their livelihoods. Again, that's obviously craziness, right? You don't want that. Okay, okay, let's continue what they said. Participants in the letter say that the following is not a petition, though it may resemble one. Rather, it is a plea for the company. Let's work together to create a more welcoming forward. It says, we are formally requesting the Apple consider remote and location flexible work decisions to be autonomous for a team to decide as hiring decisions. Okay, so maybe not company wide, so each team basically decides if they want to have people remote or not. Fair, understandable. We are formally requesting a company-wide recurring short survey with clearly structured and transparent communication feedback process at the company-wide level, organization-wide level, and team-wide level, covering topics listed below. Mate, could you imagine Steve Jobs putting up with any of this stuff? Like, the entitlement is just insane, bruv. And again, I'm the type of person that if I don't like something and I don't like a place where I'm working, I'll just leave. I don't really have a care about working for cool places, right? Like I said before, the Depop thing, like cool job, but I don't, what I mean? It's not mine, so I'm not really, I don't have this like sense of, oh my God, it's an amazing place I can stay, despite if they're doing wrong by me. But if everything is going well and they've generally got decent level people there, they pay you on time and you feel like the work is inspiring you, for this to really be a big of an issue, it just seems a little bit unimportant really in the wider scheme of things, especially when you consider the fact that, you know, most people, a lot of people have been affected very negatively through COVID. Some people have had no option or no job to go back to. They've had to kind of resort to doing other things that are kind of far less or far outside their skill set, or maybe things that are really demeaning in terms of what level of work that they're doing, and they're doing it in order to keep the lights on and, you know, be an adult and function in the world. And these people have, you know, probably one of the most coveted jobs in the world, working for one of those coveted companies in the world, and they're complaining that they have to work in the office a couple of days a week. It's like, Jesus. We're formally requesting a question about employees' churn due to remote work to be added to the exit interviews. We are formally requesting transparent, clear plan of action to accommodate disabilities via on-site, remote, hybrid, and other location-based work. And we are formally requesting an insight into the environmental impact of returning to on-site person work. Now the country got stores environment. How permanent remote and flexibility could offset that impact. I don't know, man. Imagine 81 employees causing this much of a kerfuffle over remote working out of the 1,370. I guess to be fair to them though, the 80 employees are only the ones willing to put their name on paper, because I'm assuming some of them are fearing if they put their name on paper, it's gonna really lead to them losing their jobs. But I don't know, man. I think this is a bit entitled. Maybe I'm just in the minority here, but I'd love to know your opinions on this. Would you be okay with working a couple of days per week at the Apple offices with free lunch, right? And, you know, great transportation links. I don't know if it has got to, well, let's just imagine a free laptop and all that malarkey. Or would you be pushing to work from home indefinitely? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to know your opinion on that one. What else? I think that's it. How many times have we done? I think we've done probably about over an hour already, haven't we? Yeah, we have. Okay, that's the Agostinho Zero Show, episode number 465. 465? Yeah, I think it's 465. If it's your first time checking the show via YouTube, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, leave me a comment down below. If you're listening via the podcast app, a 5-star review will help the show go a long way. That'd be greatly appreciated. And I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Take care. Be safe. Peace.